Introducing America's Workforce Academy, built by Meta. Paid training, a job, and a path to America's future. Because the future is for everyone. Learn more at meta.com/America's Workforce Academy.
New England summers don't exactly ease you in. 1 minute the windows are open, the next your apartment feels unbearable. Well, meet Windmill Air. Windmill window ACs are sleek, they're quiet, and cool your space fast without the bulky eyesore. Rated the #1 easiest AC to install, Windmill lets you adjust temperatures right from your phone and, unlike traditional units, cools your room more evenly like central air. Shop Windmill online at windmillair.com or pick up an AC at your nearest Target or Home Depot. Windmill, modern air care your room deserves.
At the central station, a luxury train gleams on the platform. 3 polished cars of wood and brass, a rolling palace waiting to whisk 100 of Italy's elite toward Milan. By afternoon, it departs, 106 souls heading north. And it should have been boring, a routine journey, forgettable. Instead, it became one of the strangest legends of the modern age. Welcome back to Paranormal Directive 13. My name is Matt, and, well, it's October. Leaves are turning, nights are getting longer, and somewhere in the distance, a chill wind whispers of things that go bump in the night. And what better way to kick off Halloween month than with a ghost story? But not just any ghost story. Tonight, we're going off the rails. And that is a horrible way to say that this is the story of a ghost train. So buckle up, keep your lantern close, and maybe, just maybe, listen for the whistle in the dark. This is the story of the Zanetti Ghost Train. Sorry, I got carried away. This is the story of the Zanetti Ghost Train. It's Rome in the summer of 1911. The platform at Roma Termini is chaos in expensive clothing. The Zanetti Company's new express service to Milan is about to depart, and everyone who's anyone has made sure they're aboard. Industrialists in 3-piece suits, their watch chains glinting in the afternoon sun. Women traveling in dresses with parasols tucked under their arms, gloved hands resting on the monogram luggage that probably cost more than most Romans earned in a year. And there's champagne. Of course there's champagne. Glasses clinking, business cards exchanging hands. The particular kind of wealthy networking that makes you almost root for disaster. Not that I'm saying they deserved what happened, but the vibe, peak Edwardian smugness. The crew moves through the final checks with military precision. Engineers inspect every valve, every pressure gauge. Porters load the last of the luggage. The conductor, a man named Giuseppe Veretti, stands on the platform with his pocket watch open, timing everything to the second. Steam hisses from the engine cylinders, white clouds billowing up into the July heat. The whistle blows, sharp, clear, and official. The kind of sound that says progress in the future. At 3:47 p.m., the Zanetti train rolls north out of Rome. 106 people on board, crew and passengers combined. For the first few hours, it's unremarkable, pleasant even. The train cuts through the Italian countryside at a steady clip, green hills rolling past the windows, vineyards stretching toward horizons dotted with villas and cypress trees. Children press their faces to the glass, pointing at sheep, at farmers waving from fields, at distant towns perched on hilltops. Inside the carriages, it's elegant bordering on ostentatious. Brass fixtures polished to mirrors, mahogany paneling, velvet seats in deep burgundy. The Zanetti Company had spared no expense. This wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. Porters are gliding through the cars with silver trays, drinks are poured, card games begin in the second-class compartments. In first class, conversations drift between business deals, upcoming elections, and someone's recent trip to Vienna. Normal. Just utterly, completely normal. But then the terrain changes. The hills give way to something older, harder. Mountains begin to rise on either side of the tracks, and the train begins to climb. This is where the route gets interesting, where the Zanetti company wanted to flex. See, older rail lines through this region took the long way around. They curved, switchbacked, added hours to the journey because, well, mountains. Solid rock doesn't care about your schedule. But the Zanetti company had money and ambition, and engineers who convinced investors that they could cut straight through. So they did. They blasted a tunnel, one of the longest in Italy at the time, over 8 kilometers of solid rock carved out by dynamite and desperation. It had taken 3 years to complete, cost overruns, accidents, delays, the whole works, but it was finished, and it was magnificent. A symbol of progress, of man's triumph over nature. The train approaches it around 7:15 p.m. as dusk begins to settle over the mountains. Passengers in the forward cars can see it now, a black mouth opening in the mountainside. The entrance is framed by fresh-cut stone, still sharp-edged, still smelling of blasting powder and damp earth. There's something raw about it, unfinished despite being complete. Inside the carriages, some people stand to watch. Others keep playing cards. A few children press closer to the windows, eager to see the tunnel swallow the light. The engineer, a man named Salvatore Russo, 38 years old, 20 years of railway experience, eases the throttle forward. Steam pressure builds, and the train's speed holds steady. The whistle blows once more, not because it needs to. There's no crossing here, no other traffic, but because it's tradition. You announce yourself to the mountain. The sound echoes off the stone walls flanking the tracks, and then the Zanetti train enters the tunnel. It never comes out the other side. Meanwhile, in Milan, families are waiting. It's 8 p.m., the train was due at 7:45. At first, no one's concerned. Trains run late, especially new routes through difficult terrain. Maybe they hit a delay, maybe there was a signal issue, a scheduled stop that took longer than expected. I'm sure some of them are cracking jokes about this fancy new train can't even make it there on time. But 8 o'clock becomes 8:15, then 8:30. The station master starts sending telegrams, tapping out messages to stations along the route. Has the Zanetti Express passed through your checkpoint? One by one, the replies come back. No sighting at Orvieto. No sighting at Arezzo. By 9 p.m., someone suggests checking with the last confirmed station before the mountain crossing. The response comes back within minutes. Train departed here at 7:05 p.m. On schedule, no issues reported. That station is just 23 kilometers from the tunnel entrance. The station master in Milan does the math in his head. Even at reduced speed for the climb, the train should have cleared the tunnel by 7:45 at the latest. It's now 9:17 p.m. At 9:30 p.m., the first search party is dispatched. Railway officials, engineers, local police, they gather what they can. Lanterns, horses, telegram equipment, and head into the mountains as night settles in. The search teams split up. Some follow the tracks leading into the tunnel from the south. Others position themselves at the northern exit where the train should have emerged. They check everything. The tracks leading up to the tunnel, intact. No breaks, no damage, rails still properly seated on their ties. The approach is clear. The tunnel itself, they walk it, which is a bold move to walk in the exit of a tunnel that you're pretty sure a train just went into. I don't know if I would want to walk into a tunnel expecting one to be coming towards me. But anyways, they walk the entire 8 kilometers, holding their lanterns high, footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The smell of dynamite residue still lingers. The air is cold and stagnant and empty. Completely and utterly empty. No train, no wreckage, no scorch marks from a fire, no twisted metal, no splintered wood, no shattered glass, not even any little bit of debris. It's as if nothing has passed through here in days. The northern exit, same story. Tracks intact, no signs of derailment, no gouges in the stone, no indication at all that several hundred tons of steel and steam ever attempted to pass through. By dawn on July 15th, the search is expanded. Teams inspect every meter of track for kilometers in both directions. They check bridges, embankments, sidings. They search for signs that the train might have been deliberately diverted or stolen or hidden. The Zanetti train, 1 engine, 3 carriages, 106 people, has vanished. Not crashed, not derailed, not stolen, vanished. The Zanetti Company's response is immediate and predictable. Deny, deflect, and bury. They issue a statement claiming mechanical failure and ongoing investigation. They refuse interviews. They start paying off families quietly on the condition that they sign non-disclosure agreements. Hush money in exchange for silence. The Italian government gets involved, but it's half-hearted. It's 1911 and they've got bigger problems. Political instability, labor strikes, and tensions with the Ottoman Empire. A missing train is embarrassing, sure, but it's not worth the kind of deep investigation that might reveal incompetence or corruption in the rail industry. So the official story becomes tragic accident, details unclear, investigation ongoing. And then the file gets buried. And for decades, the Zanetti train becomes nothing more than a footnote, a weird historical curiosity. The kind of thing mentioned in books about unsolved mysteries, usually with a rational explanation tacked on. Likely fell into an unmapped ravine, or records were probably destroyed in the war. But here's the thing. Before the story got buried, before the hush money and the non-disclosure agreements and the official silence, 2 people came forward. 2 survivors. They're found on July 16th, 2 days after the disappearance. A man and a woman, both Italian, both in their 30s, both battered, bruised, clothes torn to shreds. They're discovered along the tracks leading up to the tunnel, just lying there in the rocks and scrub, barely conscious. When authorities find them, they're incoherent, they're raving. The local doctor who examines them initially suspects head trauma, shock, possibly substance-induced hallucinations. But as they recover, their stories align, independently, down to disturbing details. They claim they jumped from the moving train, not because of a mechanical failure, not because of a fire or an accident. They jumped because something was wrong. And let me just say, this story they are about to tell is absolutely wild. And this whole story is absolutely crazy. So let's walk through what they describe, because this is where the story stops being a historical oddity and starts becoming something else entirely. According to both survivors, the journey was normal until approximately 7:10 p.m. They were in the same carriage, second-class middle car, though they didn't know each other before the boarding. The train was climbing steadily. The mountains had closed in on both sides. Most passengers were reading, dozing, or playing cards. The atmosphere was quiet and relaxed. Dinner service had just finished. Then the man noticed something outside of his window. A thick fog. Not unusual for mountains at dusk, except this fog was different. Now, you're in a steam train, which produces a lot of steam and smoke. So for these folks to notice something so thick of fog, you knew something was going on. It wasn't the wispy, transparent mist you'd expect. It was thick, dense, and white. And it was glowing. Not like it was lit from within exactly, but like it was somehow brighter than the daylight around it. And it was moving. It wasn't drifting with the wind. It was deliberately moving against the natural air currents, rolling over the tracks ahead of the train like liquid smoke, like something with intention. He said he watched it for maybe 10 seconds before the fear hit. Not nervousness, not unease, but pure terror. Primal, overwhelming, irrational terror. The kind of fear you feel in nightmares when you're being chased by something you can't see. The kind that doesn't whisper warnings, it screams at you to run. He said it felt like drowning, like being crushed, like every cell in his body was trying to flee his skeleton. And the woman felt the exact same thing at the exact same moment. Different seat, different side of the carriage. She hadn't been looking out the window, hadn't seen the fog. but the dread hit her like a physical blow. She described it as knowing, with absolute certainty, that if she stayed on the train another minute, she would die. Not might die, 100% would die. No time for questions, no time for rational thought. Both of them, independently without speaking to each other, bolted for the carriage door. Other passengers shouted, asking what was wrong, tried to grab them. They fought free. The man reached the door first, wrestled the latch, got it open. The train was doing maybe 40 kilometers per hour. The tracks were carved into the mountainside, rock and brush on one side and a steep drop on the other. He jumped anyway, and she jumped right behind him. The last thing either of them remembered clearly was the sound. Not the wind rushing past, not their own screaming. A hum. A low, deep, resonant hum, coming from the fog itself, or through it, or beneath it. A vibration that made their teeth ache, made their vision blur. And then the train whistle, sharp and clear, cutting through the hum, one long blast. And then, silence. They both lost consciousness when they hit the ground. Broken ribs, lacerations, concussions. Lucky to be alive, honestly. People don't generally walk away from jumping off of moving trains. When they came to, hours later, the tracks were empty. No fog, no train, no sound except wind through the mountains and the distant call of night birds. Just stone and sky, and the crushing weight of knowing that everyone else was gone. The Zanetti company didn't want to hear it. They interviewed them separately, multiple times, pressed them on every detail, suggested trauma, head injuries, hysteria, shared delusions. Then they paid them, significantly, enough money to disappear quietly and never to speak to journalists. Both signed agreements, both vanished from public record. Years later, fragments of their testimony would surface in railway workers' memoirs and letters and secondhand accounts, but by then the story had been sanitized, rationalized, turned into campfire material for railway taverns. The ghost train of Zanetti vanished into a tunnel. Some say they jumped, some say they saw fog, all say they were mad. For 80 years, that's where it stayed, a footnote, a curiosity. And then, 80 years later, in 1991, the train came back. Ukraine, 1991. The Soviet Union has just collapsed, and I mean just, we're talking months. The entire region is reeling, currencies worthless overnight, borders suddenly real, national identity fractured. Everything people knew about how the world works has been upended. It's a strange time. It's unstable. It's the kind of period where the past feels uncertain and the future looks impossible. And that's when the people near the village of Zavalki, a tiny farming community in western Ukraine, population maybe 600, start seeing something impossible. And I'm going to be honest, I probably butchered the name of that town, but I'm trying my best. But what they see is a train. Not a modern diesel locomotive, not electric, something older. A steam engine with 3 passenger cars, early 20th century design. Brass fixtures, elegant lines, completely out of place. It appears on the tracks. These are old tracks, mostly used for freight, rarely used for passenger service anymore. No schedule for anything like what they're seeing. And the weird part is it doesn't stay. Witnesses describe it as kind of flickering, like a mirage, like heat haze on summer asphalt, that waviness. It appears sometimes just for seconds, sometimes for a full minute or two, and then it vanishes. Not rolls away, not continues down the track, just vanishes. Like someone flipped a switch and it ceased to exist. The first reports are dismissed, obviously, to rural village, economic collapse, stress, alcohol, pick your rational explanation. But the sightings continue, different witnesses, different times of day, always the same train, always appearing, always vanishing. So now we enter Vasil Lashadi. In August 1992, a Ukrainian newspaper runs the story, mostly as a curiosity. Strange sightings near Zavalki, locals report phantom train. And that is when Lashadi reads it. Lashadi is, or was, a paranormal investigator. Self-taught, obsessive, the kind of person who fills notebooks with theories and spends weekends chasing rumors. He is the perfect embodiment of a Paranormal Directive 13 fan. He's investigated haunted houses, UFO sightings, allegedly cursed objects. Most of it goes nowhere, but he keeps looking. Because for him, this isn't entertainment, it's personal. His grandfather disappeared in 1943. Walked out of their house one evening and never came back. No body, no explanation, just gone. And he grew up with that absence, that unanswered question. So when he reads about a train that appears and disappears, about people who vanish without a trace, something clicks for him. He starts researching, digging through archives, railway records, old newspapers, and that's when he finds it. The Zanetti Train, 1911, Italy. 106 people vanished into a tunnel. The descriptions match exactly. Same type of engine, same 3-car configuration, same era. He becomes convinced this is the same train. Somehow, impossibly, it's been moving through time, appearing in different places, different eras. And if he can reach it, if he can board it, maybe he can solve it. Maybe he can find out where the passengers went. Maybe he can bring them back. On September 25th, 1992, Zanetti goes to the crossing near Zavalki. He brings witnesses, a local journalist, a friend with a camera. He wants documentation and proof. And so they wait. It's late afternoon. The air is still heavy, that pre-storm pressure where everything feels like it's holding its breath. And then the train appears. Not gradually, not rolling in from the distance. It just is. Shimmering into existence on the tracks like something half remembered, half real. The journalist starts writing. The friend fumbles with the camera. Zanetti doesn't hesitate. He runs across the gravel up to the carriage. He grabs the brass handle, and multiple witnesses say they saw this, saw him reach it, saw him pull. The door opens, and he steps inside, and the train vanishes. Vasil Zanetti was never seen again.
New England summers don't exactly ease you in. One minute the windows are open, the next your apartment feels unbearable. Well, meet Windmill Air. Windmill window ACs are sleek, they're quiet and cool your space fast without the bulky eyesore. Rated the #1 easiest AC to install, Windmill lets you adjust temperatures right from your phone and, unlike traditional units, cools your room more evenly like central air. Shop Windmill online at windmillair.com or pick up an AC at your nearest Target or Home Depot. Windmill, modern air care your room deserves.
No body, no belongings recovered, no explanation. Just another person swallowed by the Zanetti train. And suddenly, this wasn't just historical curiosity anymore. This was active. This was ongoing. The train hadn't just disappeared in 1911. It had been moving, reappearing, across decades, across borders, through time itself. After his disappearance, other investigators started connecting dots, looking backward through historical records, searching for anomalies that might fit the pattern. And they found them. Not many, but enough to suggest something horrifying. The Zanetti train had been appearing and taking people for far longer than anyone had realized. The train didn't just appear forward in time in 1991. What if this train had been appearing for centuries? Mexico City, 1845. Authorities are called to the city's outskirts, a neighborhood called Tacubaya, because locals are reporting something strange. A group of people, more than 100, wandering the streets in complete hysteria. When police arrive, they find 104 men and women, all dressed oddly. Very formal, European-style clothing, but the cuts are wrong, the fabrics are unfamiliar, like costumes from a play about the future. All of them Italian, all of them incoherent. And they're raving like lunatics, screaming. Some are catatonic, some are violent. Guards have to restrain several who are trying to fight and flee, who seem convinced they're being attacked by something invisible. Doctors are called in and interpreters are brought in. And slowly, over hours, a story emerges. They arrived by train. Now, the problem with that statement is Mexico in 1845 does not have many railways. The first short line, a 15-kilometer track from Veracruz to a nearby town, won't be completed for another 2 years. The technology they're describing, passenger carriages, a steam locomotive, brass fixtures, doesn't exist there yet. But these people are insistent. They boarded in Rome. They remember the journey, the hills, the mountains, the tunnel, and then discontinuity, missing time, a feeling of just kind of wrongness. And suddenly they're here, stumbling out of a train that vanished the moment they stepped onto the platform. The Mexican authorities don't know what to do with this. Mass delusion, some kind of cult, escaped performers from a traveling show. They're locked in a hospital, kept under observation. Most never recover. They remain institutionalized until the day they die, years, sometimes decades later. Still insisting they'd been on a train, still unable to explain how they got to Mexico. But there's one detail. One man, according to hospital records, is found with a cigarette case, brass and monogram, beautiful craftsmanship. And when the doctors examine it, they find something engraved inside. GR Roma 1907. 62 years before it was made. Or 62 years after, depending on your perspective. Were these the Zanetti passengers, ejected from the train 66 years before they boarded it, stranded in the wrong century, in the wrong country, with no way to explain what happened and no one to believe them? And if that is not strange enough, the story gets even stranger. In the archives of the Medina monks, in a place called San Giovanni Abbey, there's a record. It's handwritten in Latin, dated to approximately 1279, though the exact year is unclear. It describes an event that the monks classified as demonic. On a summer evening during Vespers, several monks were walking the grounds outside of the abbey. The sun was setting and the air was still. And then, from nowhere, came fog. The account describes it as an unnatural mist, white as lamb's wool, bright as moonlight, moving against God's wind. And from the fog emerged something the monks had no words for. They called it a satanic chariot, a demon's carriage, a beast of iron and smoke. But the description, when you strip away the religious terror, is unmistakable. 3 connected structures, made of metal, belching smoke, moving without horses, without visible means of propulsion, the sound of hissing steam and the screech of metal on metal. The monks fled, convinced they were witnessing a manifestation of hell itself. They locked themselves in the abbey, prayed through the night, and at dawn they returned to the spot. Nothing. No tracks, no burn marks, no evidence anything had been there. But the record remains, detailed and specific. And when you overlay their description with photographs of the early 20th century Italian passenger trains, it matches. The Zanetti train dropped into medieval Italy 6 centuries before it was built. How long has this train been moving? How many centuries has it been slipping through? And how many people has it taken? Now, as if time-traveling disappearances weren't enough, the legend has one more detail. And I honestly don't know if this makes the story better or worse, but it is very weird and too weird not to mention. In 1909, 2 years before the Zanetti train disappeared, someone stole Nikolai Gogol's skull. The same writer of The Overcoat and Dead Souls, one of Russia's greatest writers. He's been dead since 1852, buried in Moscow. But in 1909, his grave was opened. Some say for reburial, some say vandalism. But in the process, his skull went missing. It was never recovered. And according to some versions of the Zanetti legend, that skull somehow ended up aboard the train in 1911. Possibly carried by a passenger, possibly smuggled in luggage, possibly part of a private collection. The details kind of vary. But the story goes, the ghost train isn't just carrying 104 souls through time. It's also hauling the severed head of one of Russia's greatest writers. Because why not, right? If you're going to have a phantom train stuck in time, you might as well throw in a stolen skull. Honestly, I think this detail was added later. It is a little too perfect, a little too weird. It's kind of the flourish someone adds to an already impossible story to make it sound just a bit more memorable. So, where does that leave us? Let's recap. We have a train that vanished in Italy in 1911, disappeared into a newly built tunnel with 106 people on board. No wreckage, no bodies, just gone. We have 2 survivors who claim they jumped because of fog and overwhelming dread, who were paid to stay silent. We have sightings in Ukraine in 1991 of a train that appears and vanishes, a paranormal investigator who boards it and disappears. We have 104 Italians found in Mexico in 1845 claiming they arrived by a train that didn't exist yet, carrying a cigarette case that was made 62 years after the day they were found. We have medieval monks describing a demon's chariot that matches the description of an early 20th century passenger train. So what do we make of this? This is what we do here on Paranormal Directive 13. We pull back the curtain. We look at what this could be, because every legend, no matter how compelling, deserves a little scrutiny. And trust me, the Zanetti Ghost Train has earned a lot of scrutiny. So let's walk through the theories, all of them, from the mundane to the truly bizarre, and see where the evidence takes us. Let's start with the most uncomfortable possibility, the one that makes us feel a little foolish for ever being interested. What if the entire story is fake? Not misunderstood fake, not embellished over time fake, but literally invented from scratch fake. Because when you start to look at the actual evidence of the Zanetti disappearance, things get weird really fast. The first problem is the newspaper silence. We are talking about July 14th, 1911, or June, depending on who you ask. That's already a little suspicious. A major event that we can't even pin down to the month? But, anyways, let's say it happened in the summer of 1911. This would have been the story of the year. A luxury train with over 100 wealthy Italians, society types, company families, just vanishes with no wreckage, no bodies, no explanation. That's bigger news than most train accidents. That is Titanic level news. And yet, we have nothing. Not in the local Italian papers, not in the international press. Italian researchers have combed through archives, and you know what they found from that summer? A small accident that killed 2 people. And yes, that made the papers. But 100 people vanishing into thin air? Just crickets. The second problem is the company itself. The Zanetti Railway Company. Or was it Ginetti? Because half of the retellings can't even agree on the name. And that's not just a translation issue. People are genuinely uncertain about what this company was even called. So you go looking for records, industrial archives, lists of defunct railway companies, anything you can find. Nothing. No Zanetti, no Ginetti. Just a very common Italian surname with zero connection to trains. It's like the company never existed. And the third problem is the details that aren't there. Every version of the story talks about 106 people, sometimes 104 depending on the teller, but who were they? There's no names, not one. Not the passengers, not the crew, not even the 2 survivors who allegedly gave that newspaper interview. You'd think that someone, somewhere, would have written down Giovanni Rossi, age 32 of Milan, or something. But no, they are ghosts before they ever stepped on the train. And the tunnel? The famous tunnel where it all happened has no name. No location more specific than somewhere in Lombardy. For a piece of infrastructure that was supposedly the longest ever built in Italy at the time, that is odd to say the least. Some versions claim the tunnel was destroyed in World War I, or was it World War II? Either way, how convenient. You can't investigate the scene because it's been bombed. And that is the kind of detail that shows up in conspiracy theories and urban legends when someone needs to explain why there's no physical evidence. So where does the story come from? It turns out we can trace it. Not to 1911, not to an Italian railway disaster, but to a Ukrainian writer named Nikolai Cherkashin, who wrote a science fiction story in the 1990s called The Ghost Train in the Labyrinths of Time. A submarine officer turned author, a guy who wrote about sailors and maritime history, and then one day decided to pen a time travel story about a vanishing Italian train. And all of those details, the fog, the 106 people, the maiden voyage, the Mexican asylum, the Ukrainian sightings, and even Goggle's stolen skull, they are all in his story. The whole thing. It showed up on early internet forums in the late 90s and early 2000s, paranormal websites, unsolved mysteries pages, and at some point, someone stripped away the "this is fiction" label and started presenting it as fact. The story had all the right ingredients, named investigators, specific dates, a newspaper citation. It felt real. And once it started spreading, it became a game of telephone. By the time it reached us, it wasn't a Ukrainian author's short story. It was the Zanetti Italian Ghost Train mystery. Now, does that mean it's definitely fake? I mean, yes, kind of it does. If there's no historical record, no company, no victims, no witnesses, and a clear paper trail back to a work of fiction, it is hard to argue otherwise. But let's say we're not ready to give up on this just yet. Because as the story goes, this was all buried. So who's to say that this fake short story wasn't created to try and cover up what actually happened? Who knows? But outside of that, let's say there may be a kernel of truth buried in the legend. Maybe not necessarily a disappearing train, but maybe something did happen. Something real and something that got twisted and exaggerated over time. This brings us to theory number 2, which is the misreported accident. This is the rational skeptic position. It says, look, Italy had a railway system in 1911. Accidents happened. Maybe there was a crash, a derailment, or something tragic. And over the decades, the story got warped. Details were changed. The fog got added. The time travel stuff got tacked on. And eventually, you end up with a legend that's based on a real event, but doesn't resemble it anymore. It is not a crazy idea. We have seen it happen with other stories. It is the effect of the game telephone. One person says a train crashed in a tunnel. The next person says a train vanished in a tunnel, and 50 years later, someone's saying a train vanished into a wormhole in a tunnel and reappeared in medieval Italy. But the problem with this theory is we can't find an original accident. Researchers have looked, and they've combed through Italian railway records from 1911 and the surrounding years. And yes, there were accidents, there was trains derailed, boilers exploded, people died. That was the reality of early 20th century rail travel. But there's no accident that even remotely matches the Zanetti story. No mass casualty event in a tunnel. No unexplained disappearance. No incident involving a luxury maiden voyage. The closest thing is that accident with 2 deaths that was properly reported and fully explained. So if the legend is based on a real accident, where is it? You could argue that it's from a different country. Maybe an accident happened in, Switzerland or Austria, and it somehow got transplanted to Italy in the retelling. That happens too sometimes. But even that doesn't quite work because the details are just too specific. The Zanetti Company, the Rome to Milan route, the Lombardy Tunnel. These aren't vague folkloric details. They are the kind of specifics you'd expect from a fabricated story trying to sound real. And then there's the fog. That weird milky white mist that enveloped the tracks, and the humming sound with it. The 2 passengers who jumped off in a panic claiming something was just wrong. These aren't the details of a train crash, these are details of a ghost story, or a science fiction story. If this was a misreported accident, why would those supernatural elements be there from the start? Why wouldn't the earliest versions just say the train crashed and leave it at that?
New England summers don't exactly ease you in. One minute the windows are open, the next your apartment feels unbearable. Well, meet Windmill Air. Windmill window ACs are sleek, they're quiet, and cool your space fast without the bulky eyesore. Rated the #1 easiest AC to install, Windmill lets you adjust temperatures right from your phone and, unlike traditional units, cools your room more evenly like central air. Shop Windmill online at windmillair.com or pick up an AC at your nearest Target or Home Depot. Windmill, modern air care your room deserves.
Introducing America's Workforce Academy, built by Meta. Paid training, a job, and a path to America's future. Because the future is for everyone. Learn more at meta.com/America's Workforce Academy.
So Theory 2 doesn't quite hold up either. There's no accident to misreport and no real event that got twisted into a legend. But I will give it this. It is a comfortable theory. It lets us keep one foot in reality while still engaging with the mystery of, oh, something happened, we just don't know what. Unfortunately, the evidence doesn't really support it. So now we are getting spicy. Theory 3 says, what if the Zanetti train story was deliberate disinformation? A Cold War era psyop designed to do what exactly? Well, that's where this theory gets a little fuzzy, but let's walk through it. The story, as we know, originates with Nikolai Cherkashin, a Ukrainian writer who published it in the 1990s, right as the Soviet Union was collapsing. And the story includes weirdly specific Soviet and Ukrainian elements. The paranormal investigator in Poltava, the sightings near Zavalki, the newspaper it was in, Gogol's skull. Why would an Italian ghost train story have all of these Eastern European details? It's like someone was trying to tie the legend to the former Soviet Union. One version of this theory suggests that Cherkashin's story was planted, that it wasn't just a fun sci-fi story, but a piece of Cold War-era propaganda designed to make the West look ridiculous. Look at these gullible Westerners believing in time-traveling trains. The problem is that doesn't really make sense. For one thing, the story didn't explode in popularity until the 2000s and 2010s, after the Cold War ended. It wasn't spreading through Western intelligence agencies or newspapers in the 90s, it was bouncing around paranormal forums and obscure websites. And two, why would Soviet disinformation focus on an Italian train? If you're going to spread a fake story to embarrass the West, wouldn't you make it about, I don't know, an American train who you're in the Cold War with? Or a British one? Italy in 1911 wasn't exactly a geopolitical enemy of the USSR. But there is a softer version of this theory that's a little more plausible. Maybe Cherkashin wasn't part of a government psyop, but he was playing with Cold War-era anxieties. The 90s were a weird time in the former Soviet Union, and the certainties of the old regime were gone, and people were grasping for meaning, for mystery, for something to believe in. And stories about paranormal phenomena, UFOs, telepathy, time travel, were everywhere in post-Soviet media. His story might have been a reflection of that cultural moment, just a way to tap into the zeitgeist. He throws in some Ukrainian folklore, some Soviet-era paranormal investigators, a dash of Italian exoticism, and boom, you have a story that feels true because it's pulling from so many familiar threads. Now, do I think the Zanetti train was a Cold War psyop? No, not really. There's no evidence of government involvement, and the story doesn't fit the profile of disinformation. But I do think it could be a product of Cold War and post-Soviet culture. The paranoia, the fascination with the unexplained, the blending of fact and fiction, that's all there. So Theory 3 gets some partial credit, not for the conspiracy angle, but for recognizing that this story didn't emerge in a vacuum. So now we've covered the skeptical theories, the hoax, the misreported accident, the disinformation angle. So now let's talk about the fun theories. The ones that ask, what if it is real? Theory 4 is the time slip. This is the idea that the Zanetti train didn't crash and it wasn't a hoax. It genuinely vanished because it slipped through time. It entered that tunnel in 1911 and exited somewhere else. Somewhen else. The time slip theory takes all of those wild embellishments, the train reappearing in Mexico in the 1840s, the medieval monks seeing a satanic metal chariot, the Ukrainian sightings in the 90s, and treats them as evidence, not folklore and not fiction, but actual reports of the train reappearing across different time periods. According to this theory, the train entered some kind of temporal anomaly, maybe a wormhole, maybe a rift in space-time, maybe something we don't even have a name for yet. And instead of moving forward along the tracks, it moved sideways through time. It got shunted into the past or the future or all of them at once. And the passengers were trapped, endlessly looping through time, showing up for brief moments in different eras and different places before vanishing again. And the thing is, this theory has some sort of basis in science. Time dilation is real. If you're moving fast enough or if you're near a strong gravitational field, time will behave differently for you than it does for someone else. But that's not quite the same as traveling backwards in time. It's not a train in 1911 showing up in 1840. But here is where it gets tricky, because even if the specific story of the Zanetti train is fake, the concept of time slips isn't completely out of the possibility. There are plenty of reports, some are very well documented, of people experiencing what they describe as temporal anomalies, stepping into a place that feels out of time, seeing buildings or people that shouldn't be there. The question is, are those real? Are they actually moving through time? Is it glitches in perception? Or if we are living in a simulated reality, is it an error of code glitching you into a different section and then bringing you back again as it fixes itself? Who really knows? Now, the last theory, and this is for you true Paranormal Directive 13 true believers. Theory 5 is that something paranormal happened. Not time travel, not a hoax, not an accident, but something else. Something we don't understand, something that exists outside the boundaries of conventional science. Maybe it was a dimensional rift or a doorway to somewhere else, another plane of existence. Maybe it was a haunting that worked in reverse. Instead of ghosts lingering in our world, we got pulled into theirs. Maybe it was something even weirder, an entity or a force, something that watches the railways and occasionally reaches out and takes things. This theory doesn't rely on physics or history. It relies on the idea that the universe is stranger than we know. There are corners of reality where the rules bend and where trains can vanish and reappear, where two passengers can feel something coming and know deep to their core they need to jump. And honestly, you can't really disprove this theory. You can point to lack of evidence. You can point to the story tracing back to that fictional work. You can see the missing records, the phantom company, the unnamed passengers. But I cannot tell you with absolute certainty that the paranormal didn't happen. Because by definition, paranormal is unfalsifiable. It exists in the gaps, in the things we can't explain. And the thing is, people did report seeing the train, or something like it. In Ukraine in the 90s, near that railway crossing in Zavalki, people actually saw the train. But if those sightings are genuine, then maybe something was out there. Maybe not the original 1911 train, but something. Maybe the Zanetti train was real and got sucked into a parallel universe, which is our universe now, where Zanetti and the train and the 106 passengers never existed. And we are seeing glimpses of that in our universe now that would have no historical record because they weren't part of our timeline. This is the Mandela effect. This is the CERN super collider all over again. Maybe this existed somewhere else and got pulled into our world just for glimpses at a time, and the story evolved from that. So here we are, 5 theories ranging from total hoax to something paranormal happened. And where does that leave us? Honestly, probably somewhere in the middle. I do believe the Zanetti Ghost Train as a historical event is fiction. It was a story written by a Ukrainian author in the 90s that escaped into the wild and became something bigger. Something real in a cultural sense, even if it's not real in a factual sense. But there is always the possibility of what I just described, that it is real, just not real to us. So ask yourself, is the Zanetti train out there, rattling through time and space, haunting tunnels and railway crossings? Probably not, but maybe, just maybe, the next time you're on a train and it slows down near a tunnel and you see a strange fog rolling in, you'll think about it and you'll wonder and you'll hold your breath until you come out the other side. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. I love doing this one because the Zanetti train story is crazy. You go from this train that just disappears and all of a sudden it's back in medieval times and it's in the 90s and then it's in the 1840s. There's also reports that I didn't even include in here where apparently it was seen in Chernobyl. It was seen in other parts of Europe. It was seen, I believe, in the British Channel crossing. Like, it's been seen everywhere. So it's a weird story that by all accounts is 100% fake. It by every measurable way you can look at this, it is a fake story written by an author in the 90s that just spread like wildfire. But then why is it being seen? Why are people seeing it? Why is it still persisting? So I do really like the parallel dimension theory. I think that would be really cool if that's truly what happened, is that this train was from a parallel universe and slipped into ours and we saw it and we got little tidbits of the story and created the story from it. That would be super cool. So I hope that's really what's going on here. But thank you guys so much for being here. This is just the start of October, so we are going to be doing ghost stories all month long on the social medias, every single day of October, 31 days of ghost stories, maybe some more haunted trains, definitely some ghosts, maybe some aliens. No, we're always going to do aliens, so don't worry about that. There will be alien stuff too. But there's going to be the 31 days of Halloween on social media, so make sure you check those out. Please also go on whatever podcast app you use and leave a rating and leave a review. It is huge for helping us grow the show and finding new audiences. And make sure to share the show. That is the big key. I love the ratings and reviews. I love reading everything that I get on them. But share the show with someone who you think would know it. Share it with the world. Put it on your Zanetti Ghost Train and send it into a tunnel and see if we can get some other dimension listeners, because that would be super cool as well. So please, if you have 2-3 minutes after this, leave a rating. A written review would be amazing. Those help a lot too. But even just a star review, preferably 5 stars, that would be wonderful. But if you think I suck and you don't like my voice and you think that this stuff is stupid, I don't know why you're still this far into the episode. But if you made it this far and you think it's terrible, then go ahead and leave it, 2 stars. Don't do 1. Or I guess you could do 1 star if you really wanted, but preferably I want you to do 5 stars. So either way, leave a review. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/paranormaldirective13. There are minisodes on there. There's going to be more Halloween stuff coming up on there. So check that out. Check out the social medias, like I just said, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Paranormal Directive 13. So thank you guys again so much. I can't wait to bring you next week's episode. And remember, whatever you do, don't jump off a moving train unless you really, really need to.
Every wireless service comes with a cost, right? Wrong. The Text Now app lets you do your thing for free. Get real talk, real text, and 5G data for must-have apps with no monthly bill. Need more data? Add it right from the app. Done? Go back to free. No long-term contracts, no pressure, no surprises. Just wireless that works around you. Text Now. We've got your back. Download Text Now in your app store today. Wireless plans require the purchase of a SIM card. Visit textnow.com for terms and conditions.
Introducing America's Workforce Academy, built by Meta. Paid training, a job, and a path to America's future. Because the future is for everyone. Learn more at meta.com/America's Workforce Academy.
New England summers don't exactly ease you in. One minute the windows are open, the next your apartment feels unbearable. Well, meet Windmill Air. Windmill window ACs are sleek, they're quiet, and cool your space fast without the bulky eyesore. Rated the #1 easiest AC to install, Windmill lets you adjust temperatures right from your phone and, unlike traditional units, cools your room more evenly like central air. Shop Windmill online at windmillair.com or pick up an AC at your nearest Target or Home Depot. Windmill, modern air care your room deserves.